Commander Brian McDonald, to whom Michael Bachurkov, when I was speaking to him earlier, made very favourable reference as well, very admiring reference to him and the Dutch commanders and the way that they've managed this very tense situation. As we've mentioned earlier, they've gained access to the site, really, as Michael McDonald said there, a reconnaissance mission, but more bodies were spotted there, human remains were spotted at the crash site, but also the good news that there were some areas that seemed to be absolutely untouched as well. So some sort of secure corridor is now apparently being established. Will that really work? For more on that situation in Ukraine, we're joined now by Dr. John Blaxland, who's a senior fellow at the ANU's Strategic and Defence Studies Centre in Canberra. John Blaxland, good morning and good to talk to you again.
Good morning, Virginia.
So, well, first of all, what do you make of the session of Ukrainian Parliament that did approve the Dutch and Australian control of the MH17 crash site? Does it follow logically that the combatants in the area will honour that agreement?
No, it doesn't, unfortunately. Unfortunately, the situation is that the Ukraine is in a position where it's got competing interests. On one side, it has an interest to keep the West happy, to keep the Dutch and the Australians and others placated, and to go some length to satisfy their requirements to have access to the site and to deal with the recovery of the bodies and the forensic work. But on the other hand, they've got a very compelling national interest to exploit the opportunities that have been presented to them over the last few days, with the militia and the rebels and the Russians essentially being on the back foot because of the international pressure, because of the circumstances on the ground, and because of the international exposure. Those pressures are really creating a tension, and so it's very important that the Australians who are deployed there keep their eyes and ears very firmly opened and alert to indicators of nuanced messages and to double speak, because what we're seeing is the situation where essentially there really is very mixed motives, compelling reasons for them not to be straight with us about what they're doing.
These officials and these police officers from both sides can now go in armed, should they?
I would hasten to go down that path, caution against that, I should say. My concern is that this is really bad optically, and this is something that the rebels, the Russians and the Ukrainians could all exploit if this doesn't work out right. The thing is that the people should only go in there, the Australian and Dutch team should only go in there when they're confident the situation is secure. And I think we need to be prepared for this to take some time. We need to be confident that the circumstances are okay. The gunfire and the shelling going on around us, around the delegation that's there, is disconcerting. Small arms weapons are really not going to be the solution to the problem if you've got incoming shell fire. That might give some comfort, but it's not really going to be effective. And it's in the PR battle, it's going to be counterproductive, I would argue. Speaking
of that PR battle, and this is very important when you speak about the opportunities that have been presented to the combatants by the last few days. One of those opportunities, to be brutal about it, is the fact that the world's cameras are now there. Now, what new element does that introduce into this awful battle?
Well, you know, the thing is that Ukraine is very much measuring its actions in light of that, but they're still applying a lot of pressure. And the report we just heard about the pressure on Donetsk, the bottom line is that the pincer movement to surround Donetsk is proceeding, and it seems to be working pretty well. And on the other side, of course, Russia and Vladimir Putin, they're spinning the message in a completely opposite direction to what we're getting in the West. So their perceptions, the perceptions that they're putting in through the media in Russia and through their various forums, is very much of this being Ukrainian aggression and us being effectively pawns in the equation. So we have to be very, very careful about how this plays out and how this is exploited by both sides.
Just finally this morning, Dr. John Blaxland, as we know, of course, Russia on the Security Council voted, as it was a unanimous vote, in support of that resolution that would secure the crash site, the hostilities would cease and that people would be given peaceable access to it. That's what they voted for. Their actions, as you understand or you project behind the scenes, do they seem to support it?
Well, look, you know, the thing is that we know it's pretty clear evidence, quite compelling evidence, that the Russians have been playing a double game. They've been saying one thing to us, they've been doing another thing on the ground, and they've been sending a different message to their own people through the Russian media. So we have to be very sceptical about what we hear in affirming remarks we might get back from the Russians about their intentions or what we're seeing on the ground. And likewise with the Ukrainians, the bottom line is that neither side has our interests at heart, and we need to be very, very cautious.
John Blaxland, always good to talk to you. Thank you.
My pleasure.